So in my life, there's been kind of on the world stage, there's been a lot of division. I've come up from the 1970s, 80s, 90s, the 2000s. This is now 2022. And there's been a lot of people at odds, whether it's nations, people on other sides of sports teams or sports, games, franchises. There have been a lot of division. And I think for all the problems that they've caused, I think some of the world religions have done a great job of at least exposing us to other ways of thinking in terms, other ways that people have battled with the questions that we're going to experience in the human experiment, right? The meaning of life, how to live properly, how to live in community or, not at odds with one another. They've at least, given us examples of how people have battled with those and some of the answers they've come up with. I do think it's important, though, for us to kind of go beyond the teachings or, go beyond what we read or what we're exposed to. For me, I grew up in America, I live in America, so I've predominantly been exposed to the Christian tradition. Growing up and probably still am, it's predominantly been, I've got exposure to some of the Eastern philosophies and the other world religions, but predominantly it's been, my exposure to religion has been the Christian tradition. And I was meditating recently on what it means to love thy neighbor as thyself. And again, I think for us to be exposed to certain teachings, but then to be able to find interpretations and find meaning for ourselves, and kind of battling with, especially the year 2000, there's a pandemic, it's still going on. There are a lot of people, that are at odds. Some of them are divided along political lines, ideological lines, and this concept of love thy neighbor kept coming up to me, and it wasn't really what I thought it was. I mean, it wasn't like, love thy neighbor as thyself. Maybe a very simple interpretation of that would be, the person, down the street or in your community, to try to show compassion for that person. But it's not, probably when I was growing up, I was thinking, to be compassionate towards that person who lives down the street, who collects your mail when you're out of town or loans you their weed whacker, or that cool old lady that makes those great jams, every Christmas and passes them around. Really, when I think of the division in the world right now, people are angry with Republicans or Democrats or people of another faith. To me, it really means, love that neighbor. Love that person that you feel or that you think you're at odds with. Essentially, we're all one. We're 7.8 billion of us having 7.8 different experiences, but in our consciousness, we're one entity, right? I think of it like, we're like a big piece of coral in the ocean, right? We all, some of the nodes of the coral kind of facing the surface of the ocean, and they have more sun exposure. Some are on the bottom, some are on the sides. The tide goes, whatever. They all experience different things, but they're all pieces of that same piece of coral. And so when I see, there are people, God, especially when you walk by people with a mask or without a mask, and people scoff, or people, you hear about the Republicans, the Democrats are the problem, the Democrats and Republicans are the problem. Really, that I think what Jesus, and again, I'm just exposed to the Christian tradition, so, I'm more understanding and more well-versed in those teachings. But really what I feel like he was preaching, or maybe you believe he existed, maybe you don't, but that concept was more trying to champion the idea of that love as a power source, as a power center. And to embody that is to be in your power center. So to be able to get there however you can, get to that place where you can love that person you think is doing wrong. You can have compassion, forgiveness, understanding. We can have empathy for that. Puts us more in that place. There's a great book called Whatever Arises, Love That, by a guy named Matt Kahn. And the concept is presented that if I can, whatever comes at me in my life, if I can love that, I can start to kind of rewrite my experience and change my response to the things that come up in my life that maybe I don't necessarily like or that I wouldn't choose. And so I think, what I do as I go about my day and I have things that frustrate me, things that stress me, I work to approach that from a place of compassion, from a place of understanding, and really recognizing that somewhere along the way, someone recognized that being in that place puts us in our best position, and a couple of the things in that book, especially that he talked about was, the low-hanging fruit. So being in a place where, the low-hanging fruit would be like the weather and the car in front of me. If I can get to a place where whatever that weather is, whether it's hot, cold, rainy, sunny, I'm grateful for what it is. I'm grateful, that it's there, that I'm experiencing it. The car in front of me is going slow, it cuts me off. If I can be in that place, and now these are things that aren't personal. So that's where I call it the low-hanging fruit. Those are the easiest ones for me to start to change my response to them, how I experience them, how I respond to that. Then I can start to work that into maybe things that are a little bit more personal. But it all kind of started with me recognizing that lesson of love thy neighbor, really was more about putting me in my power place and getting me in my heart. And that leads with forgiveness, with compassion, with empathy. It definitely seems to be a message that the world needs. I mean, we're so divided on every single topic. And then we're at odds. We're fighting. We're arguing. We're bombing, And I think for men, let's be honest. I think, women and children don't bomb countries. Like it's, men that do it. I think for us, it's a real big lesson that we can take, to really try to embody that so that we can set an example for our world leaders, for people that do, create policy and create things that can further divide us. To lead with compassion, to lead with empathy, forgiveness. So love thy neighbor. I don't think it's the one, the neighbor that loans you their weed whacker. It's the one who really does us wrong. That when we can shift our response and come from a place of compassion, I think that's really where we can be in our power zone.